Welcome to Centaur Financial Services Podcast. The information provided on and made available through this video and podcast does not constitute as financial product advice. The information is of a general nature only and does not take into account your individual objectives, financial situation or needs. It should not be used, relied upon, or treated as a substitute for specific professional advice. We recommend that you obtain your own independent professional advice before making any decision in relation to your particular requirements or circumstances.
Hello and welcome back to Centaur's podcast. I'm Nick Georgopoulos, joined today by fellow advisor Bobby Byrne.
G'day,
How are you,
guys.
Bobby?
Very well.
That's the way. Today, guys, we are talking about intergenerational wealth transfer. Now, pretty long fancy name, Bobby. What is that?
You're right. So essentially, again, name kind of in the title there, it's the transfer of wealth from one generation to the next.
Yeah.
In particular, kind of the baby boomer cohort,
Yeah.
being the biggest cohort of the population, as they kind of transition into retirement now and through retirement.
Yes.
Obviously, they've got about 50% of the wealth, I believe.
Huge.
In the country, massive. So
Yeah.
obviously, that's got to transfer through to the next generation.
Yeah.
So that's what this is all about, and planning for that, basically.
Yeah, and something we've been highlighting with our clients more and more as our conversations go on is what are your current plans for distributing your wealth? Do you have preferences in place? And then, of course, all the considerations that come along with that. What are we planning in towards of tax? Do you actually have a proper estate planning in place? Do all your family members know what your preferences are to how your wealth is to be distributed? So very timely conversation. I suppose if I jump to yourself and ask you, what are some of the main things that you're finding when you're having these discussions with your clients?
Yeah, for sure. So generally when we start talking about this, looking at the longer term view, it's that a lot of people don't have a will or an estate plan at all.
Yes.
So generally speaking, when we're having discussions about estate planning, we're not estate planning specialists in the terms that we write the will and we're not always there, but we can kind of advise around strategies to do with that.
Yeah.
So we're looking at, definitely having a will as the kind of bedrock of your estate plan.
Yes.
And then within that, you may even be considering testamentary discretionary trust or something like that for further asset protection or distribution of wealth.
Yeah.
We're looking at enduring powers of attorney as well, just as an absolute precaution there. Advanced healthcare directives as well.
Yes.
NHB. And we often get the estate planners in the office to kind of have that conversation with clients and us as well. So that's probably the main thing I'm finding with these conversations to start with.
Yeah.
What about yourself?
Yeah, it's a few interesting ones that have come up recently. It is somewhat the matriarch of the family that's built the wealth. You find a lot of the stories are started with nothing, built a lot of wealth, whether it be through companies or property or what have you. And now they're starting to do this future planning and thinking, well, I actually would like my wealth to serve a certain purpose.
Yeah.
And it's actually just starting to bring these conversations to light, not only with the person who's planning it initially, but also the people that are to eventually receive that wealth. And then you start considering it from an investment perspective. So now that this wealth is no longer only has a 30-year time frame to be cashed out, that's no longer the real thought behind it. It's now a 50, 100, 150-year sort of time frame around the investment, where now we're considering, okay, is there ways that we can use the assets to generate income for a number of different generations moving forward. So starting at the will and getting more complex to that side is where a lot of these conversations are starting to go now. And then that's starting as your bedrock, getting the estate planning lawyers in to somewhat help facilitate that timeline of wealth distribution. And then coming after that, obviously, okay, well, what are we doing around taxes? We know there's different tax treatments for things like the family home and superannuation, and then personally held share portfolios. So there's a lot of different considerations to go into it, and then of course, are there ways to minimise that tax as well?
Yeah, for sure. And just getting into the nitty gritty of what can and can't go into an estate. So we have estate assets and not estate assets, and certain things don't actually go into the will, so you have to provision for them elsewhere, or they'll just pass over to the surviving owner, let's say joint ownership or something like that, as opposed to tenants in common. So they're conversations we're having as well, just reviewing what your structures are at the moment and who actually controls those at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And what about superannuation? How does that factor into all this?
Well, we know that superannuation doesn't actually form a part of the estate. So there has to be arrangements made within your superannuation to somewhat allow them to understand how that wealth is going to be distributed, and it might run in accordance with your estate. So you might be directing your superannuation assets to your estate. It might be to certain beneficiaries or allowable beneficiaries or income streams to the spouse only. So there is a lot of flexibility in this planning. So emphasising that starting the conversation sooner rather than later is really a must, because the later you start to plan to fail, as the saying goes.
That's for sure. I think you touched on a point before as well, is getting the actual beneficiaries of the estate involved in wherever what's actually happening as well. Massively important.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's not only from, I suppose, there's taxation that comes along with that as well, but you want that protection of the estate. If your likely beneficiaries are people that may have mixed families or potential litigation against them, whether they're high risk industries that they're working in, there's that whole plethora of risk that comes along with them eventually receiving that estate, and that estate going to an unintended party potentially as well. So there's a lot of hypotheticals that go into place there, but a lot of protection that can be put in place with the help of an advisor and an estate planning lawyer.
Yeah, I think the estate planning lawyer is really key as well, because even the conversations when we have them in, just to give us a bit of an update on the education front, some of the stuff they can talk about and they've seen in the case law they reference is incredible. So if you do have a bit more complexity, say blended family, something like that, definitely worthwhile going and actually see them, talk through the potential issues and get that organised before something happens and then your assets aren't distributed the way you want to in the first place.
Yeah, get that legacy wealth distributed within your wishes. Don't assume and so on there. I suppose today's podcast is really more of a call to action, encouraging you to start that conversation, whether it be with your advisor, your estate planning lawyer, or even just within your family unit, to really ensure that everybody is on the same page as how things will eventually be distributed. Down the track, it may stop a lot of potential fights within family units, that everyone understands how that's going to work. But
I think that's a good kind of spot to finish up. So the message from this one is start the conversations, have the conversations with us, and then if we go into the estate planning process, we can help to organise that as well. But until next time, thanks for listening, everyone. Again, always shoot through questions if they come up. We're always happy to go back and forth on that, and we'll speak soon.
Thank you.